My fiancé's friends joked that he had a backup fiancé waiting in case I ever messed up. I smiled like it was no big deal. Then I walked over to the girl they meant, placed the cheap $100 ring in her hand, and said, "Go ahead. He's yours now." The whole room went silent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. It happened at our engagement party. 20 people packed into my Chicago loft, half drunk, laughing too loudly. Music thumping against exposed brick walls I'd worked so hard to make feel like home. I was in the kitchen cutting cheese, arranging a board I'd spent over an hour perfecting, when Adam's best friend, Trevor, lifted his beer and shouted, "Come on, we all know it. If Lily ever messes up, Ellie's ready on the bench, right? Backup fiancé." I froze. The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter, but I stood there waiting for Adam to say something, waiting for him to shut it down, defend me, prove that I wasn't just a placeholder until something shinier came along. But he laughed. My fiancé, the man who'd proposed to me 6 months earlier with a $100 ring he called ironic, stood there and laughed while his best friend implied I was disposable. Ellie, the childhood friend he always claimed was like a sister, sat on my couch smiling. Not embarrassed, not shocked. A smile that told me everything I hadn't wanted to see. So I made a decision. I walked across the room, pulled the engagement ring from my pocket, placed it into Ellie's hand and said, "Tag in, sweetheart. He's all yours." But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I got to that moment, how I ended up nuking my own engagement party in front of everyone Adam cared about, you need to know who I was before that night. My name is Lily Turner. I'm 31 years old, and until 3 nights ago, I genuinely believed I had my life figured out. I'm a freelance graphic designer who works from home more often than I'd like to admit, usually in pajamas, hair in a loose bun, coffee going cold on my desk. My loft sits on the 4th floor of a renovated warehouse in River North. Tall windows, exposed beams, just enough room for a bed, workspace, vintage couch, and a kitchen that barely fits 2 people at once. But it was mine, my name on the lease, my furniture, my rules. Adam had moved in slowly after a year of dating. First a toothbrush, then shirts in my closet, then his laptop on my desk, his shoes by my door, his life seeping into mine until I couldn't remember what my loft looked like before him. We'd met at a mutual friend's summer barbecue. Adam had been standing near the grill arguing about charcoal with the host. He had that charming, easy laugh people liked instantly. He felt safe, stable, everything the men before him weren't. He worked as a sales manager for a tech startup, a job that sounded more glamorous than it paid, but I didn't mind. My income was steady enough. We weren't rich, but we had enough to enjoy dinners out, weekend trips, lazy Sundays. Those Sundays were our favorite. Farmer's market in Lincoln Park. Adam carrying the bags while I picked produce I'd later forget existed. Then coffee on my balcony watching the city wake up. It felt like a life forming. My younger sister Mia, sharp-tongued, perceptive, the human version of a lie detector, lived 2 hours away with her husband and twin boys. When she met Adam for the first time, she pulled me aside afterward. "He's too smooth," she warned. "Watch him." I laughed. "You don't trust anyone." "I trust people who are the same even when no one's watching," she said. I brushed her off. My parents adored Adam. They lived in a quiet suburb of Tampa, retired teachers who loved anyone who could grill and smile politely. They welcomed him like family immediately. 6 months ago, Adam proposed. At our usual coffee shop, a tiny place near my loft known for the best oat milk lattes in Chicago. It was a Tuesday morning. I was working on a bakery logo when he slid a velvet box across the table. The ring inside was hammered silver with a cubic zirconia stone. Cheap, obviously cheap, but Adam grinned like it was the most thoughtful thing ever. "It's ironic," he said. "We're not those people who need diamonds to prove anything. This is so us." I'd laughed. I'd agreed. I'd taken a selfie and posted it with a joking caption. People commented how authentic and adorable it was, but some reactions were quieter. My coworker Dana had texted me, "Cute ring. You good with it?" I'd sent a thumbs up, but when she saw it in person, she raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and sipped her coffee. That silence stuck with me. Planning the engagement party felt harder than it should have. Adam wanted casual. His mom, Evelyn, wanted fancy. I suggested a restaurant. Adam insisted. My friends will feel like they have to behave. So we did it his way. My loft casual, 20 people, cheap beer, minimal decor. I spent a week cleaning every corner, building a gorgeous charcuterie board and stringing Edison bulbs to make my little loft glow. Guests arrived. Adam, transformed. He wasn't the man who curled around me in bed or made quiet jokes while we cooked dinner. He was loud, energized, laughing with people I barely knew, telling old stories I wasn't part of. Every time I tried to stand beside him, he drifted away. I became the hostess, not the fiancée. Not the woman he was supposed to celebrate. Just the one refilling drinks and wiping spills. When Ellie walked in, everything shifted. The room seemed to pull toward her. Adam hugged her long, his hand lingering on her back. She looked flawless, like she knew the exact kind of power she held. I stood there slicing cheese, telling myself I wasn't jealous, that I wasn't imagining anything, that Adam loved me. Then Trevor stood, swaying on his feet, raised his beer, and said the words that shattered the life I thought I was building. If Lily ever bails, Ellie's been ready in the wings for years. Backup fiancé. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. Adam didn't defend me. Ellie smiled, and I finally saw the truth. I walked across the room, pulled out the ring, placed it in Ellie's hand, and said, "He's yours now." The room fell silent, but for the first time in years I felt clear. The silence was absolute, so complete I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Ellie stared at the little velvet box in her hand, her face moving through shock, confusion, and then a color that could have been horror. "Lily, she started, but I cut her off. "Keep it," I said. "Apparently you've been waiting long enough." The room rippled. Conversation stalled. Adam pushed through the crowd, red in the face. "Lily, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted. "You can't just." "It wasn't just a joke when your friend announced I'm replaceable," I said, voice low and steady. "It wasn't a joke when you laughed. I'm done reacting." He grabbed my arm. The grasp was frantic, entitled. I yanked free and walked to the door. "Party's over," I said. The sound of my own voice startled me, calm, final. People shuffled toward the exit, some apologetic, some annoyed, most eager to escape the awkwardness. Trevor muttered something crude, and Ellie blinked as if waking from a daze. She tried to hand the box back, trembling slightly. "Keep it," I repeated. "He's yours now." I shut the door behind the last guest, and the lock clicked in a way that felt like punctuation. The exposed bulb still twinkled, throwing soft light over plates with half-eaten food and plastic cups. It looked like a scene someone might describe as a staging for humiliation. I looked at the ring on the coffee table where Ellie had dropped it. $100 hammered silver, cubic zirconia. I opened it and whispered, "Best $100 I ever spent," before tucking it back into the box and setting it on the shelf. The pounding on my door started less than 10 minutes later, yelling, then thudding, then the frantic chorus of voices. "Lily, open up. We need to talk about this." Adam's voice was tight, then adjacently slurred as Trevor and a couple of others joined. I sat down on the couch with my earbuds in, scrolling to a podcast about financial independence I'd bookmarked months ago. The irony steadied me. Let them exhaust themselves outside my door while I listened to calm, practical voices about investment strategies. After 20 minutes, the hallway quieted. The inevitability of neighbors and landlords and conscience, or the lack thereof, seemed to suck the steam out of their outrage. I took out my earbuds, moved through the apartment, and began the work of reclaiming the space. I called a locksmith that morning. The tech arrived, a steady man named Tom who swapped the deadbolt for a sturdier, high-security lock and handed me 3 new keys like objects of power. "People change when they can't get in," he said. "Smart move." I boxed Adam's things, shirts, sneakers, his ridiculous collection of novelty mugs, and labeled the boxes with brutal honesty. Clothing, toiletries, electronics. As I packed, a stack of mail slid from the nightstand drawer and spilled across the floor. Tucked beneath receipts and an old takeout menu was a birthday card, embossed and unsent, addressed on the inside. For the one who's always been there. No signature. Dated 2 weeks before. My hands went cold. This joke Trevor had made, backup fiancé, wasn't a drunken invention. It was a script somebody had been reading from for months. Adam pounded the door again when I changed the locks. I answered through the chain. "Your key doesn't work," he said, incredulous. "I live here." "No," I said. "You stayed here. Guest privileges revoked." He argued, predictably, "This is insane. You can't throw me out. I deserve an explanation." But the logic was thin sludge over rage. He hauled boxes down the hallway, his face red and frantic, and on his last trip paused for effect. "You'll regret this," he said, voice low and venomous. I watched the elevator doors swallow him and felt an odd lightness in my chest. Not because I'd hurt him, but because I refused to keep carrying a life that made me small. The next morning, my phone filled with messages. Adam's texts cycled between anger, guilt-inducing pleas, and manipulative one-liners about how I'd ruined 4 years. Sienna, Ellie in a nicer name, sent a frightened apology. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for it to happen. Please call me." I didn't call back. Even worse was a text from his mother. "I always knew you had a vindictive streak." I clicked block on a string of names. Trevor, Kyle, Finn, Derek. Each tap felt like shedding a weight. When the building manager called about anonymous complaints, someone had reported noise disturbances and, absurdly, chemical smells coming from my vents. I realized retaliation had started sooner and smaller than I'd feared. Adam couldn't control my presence anymore, so he'd weaponized the system. I called a friend, Dana, and she brought me Vanessa Hartley, the sharp, no-nonsense lawyer she recommended for emergencies. Vanessa sat me down in a glass-walled conference room and listened while I told the story from the beginning. She typed, leaned back, and said, "This is retaliation. Classic." She drafted a cease and desist on the spot, certified letters to Adam, Trevor, and Sienna, detailing harassment and warning that further contact would be documented for civil action. The bill was a hollowing blip, but worth every penny. The moment I had paper and representation, something changed inside me. The frantic reaction that had ruled the last few days exchanged for cool action. I emailed building management with a factual summary and copied my lawyer. I documented everything. For 3 days after the letters went out, the pressure eased. Then the silence felt unnerving, like held breath. I started to breathe again in small increments. I cooked real meals, worked on a bakery rebrand that came through unexpectedly, and let little pleasures return. A hot cup of coffee on my balcony, a text from Mia that said, "I'm proud of you." Then Sienna texted again from an unknown number. "I'm out. He wanted me to call your landlord and say I saw drugs. I can't do this. I'll talk to you soon." I screenshot the message and saved it to a folder labeled legal, then deleted the thread. Her sudden conscience was not mine to shepherd. If she'd been a pawn, or worse, a willing player, her remorse didn't absolve anyone else. 2 days later, Richard, Adam's father, called polite and practiced to ask about an espresso machine. "He's having back pain without it," he said. The audacity was almost funny. The espresso machine? I told him I'd paid for it with my credit card, and if he wanted it back, I'd accept Venmo. 2 minutes later, a ping confirmed a payment. He picked up the machine, gave no look, no apology. He'd paid $350 to remove me from his son's life. I set the machine back inside like a trophy I'd cashed in and watched the elevator doors swallow him again. That was the last of the drama for a while. The weeks after were quiet in a way that felt restorative. I slept across the bed, took up space, ate chili at midnight, watched British baking shows Adam used to deride. Small rebellions that tasted like freedom. Work flowed. The bakery referral led to a non-profit rebrand, Hope and Harvest, that became a steady 6-month contract. I met Lisa, their creative director, and the work reminded me why I'd chosen design. The chance to tell a story with color and type and heart. Slowly, life reknit itself. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen because I'd been absorbed by a relationship that didn't make room for people who mattered. I started a drawing class at the community center just for me. Charcoal and watercolors, messy and honest. One afternoon, Trevor approached me at a coffee shop and stammered an apology, the kind that smelled of embarrassment more than empathy. I accepted it in a way that felt small and civil, not triumphant. Closure didn't need fireworks. It needed boundaries. Mia told me she was proud, and Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor who'd watched over the building for decades, brought me chamomile tea and said, "A man who loves you never makes you feel like you're waiting in line." Her words landed like an anchor. For once, I didn't feel defensive. I felt understood by someone who'd lived the arc of a life and seen what mattered. Months passed. Adam and Sienna became a real thing, and I encountered them once at the farmer's market. He looked comfortable with her. She clutched sunflowers and seemed delighted. For a moment, I felt a flash. Old hurt, quick, and then it dissipated. I waited for the sting and found instead a mild curiosity, then a sense of closure. The person who'd made me small was no longer my problem. Work expanded. The Hope and Harvest project led to other contracts. Lisa invited me to gallery openings where I met people who weren't performative, who actually listened. Marcus, a high school English teacher I met at one of those openings, listened with attention, laughed in the right places, and later asked if I wanted dinner. When he left, there was no needy reach, no performance in his eyes, just a genuine smile and a hope that felt uncomplicated. On cool autumn nights, I rearranged my loft, moved the couch to face the windows, added emerald and burnt orange pillows, hung prints that made me smile, placed my charcoal sketches in frames. I stopped second-guessing myself. I started taking up space, literal and figurative, and it changed everything. I realized how much of myself I'd shaved off to make someone else feel big. The relief of regrowth was a quiet revolution. 6 months later, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, planning a pitch for an expanded role with Hope and Harvest. My phone no longer dictated my mood. It held invites and client emails and messages from friends who'd stuck around. I wasn't waiting for Adam to call. I wasn't dressing for anyone else's approval. I was quite simply living. Sometimes at night, I'd catch my reflection on the living room window and barely recognize the person staring back. Not because I'd changed into someone new, but because I'd stopped shrinking. The velvet box I'd dropped in the donation bin on a whim that first week was now long gone. A tiny ceremonial gesture to the life I'd left. There were bruises, emotional scars that flickered in certain songs or smells, but they were marks of survival, not defeat. If you'd asked me at the beginning which I feared more, being alone or being small, I wouldn't have known. Now I can say with clarity, I feared being small. Leaving Adam meant facing the very real possibility of being lonely. But loneliness is different than solitude. Solitude can be full. It can be a room you fill with your own sound. It can be a life you design, not one you adapt to because someone else can't bear to be second best. The city breathed around me, streetlights, the distant hum of trains, the river cutting through downtown like a silver seam. I poured another cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and at the top of a blank document wrote the words I'd been too afraid to name aloud. I choose myself. That morning, sunlight spilled through the tall loft windows, making the dust in the air glow like a floating constellation. I stretched across my bed, the entire bed, and realized with startling clarity that for the first time in years, waking up didn't feel like bracing for impact. It felt like possibility. Quiet. gentle, mine. I made coffee just the way I liked it, not the way Adam claimed was better. I wrapped myself in my favorite oversized sweater, the one he said made me look like I hadn't grown up yet, and stood barefoot on my balcony overlooking Chicago's waking city. Joggers passed below, bundled couples walked their dogs. A street vendor set up his cart. Normal, peaceful, beautiful, and somewhere out there, Adam existed, but the realization carried no sting, no curiosity, no emotional pull. I wasn't wondering what he was doing. I wasn't waiting for him to reach out. I wasn't longing for closure he'd never have the courage to give. I was just living. I checked my calendar. Brunch with Dana at 11, drawing class at 2, and maybe a late visit to Mia if the drive didn't feel too heavy. A full day. A full life. One entirely of my own choosing. Around 10 a.m., I met Marcus for coffee near the Arts District. We'd accidentally fallen into a weekly routine, though neither of us called them dates yet, but they were. We both knew. He was already there when I arrived, 2 cappuccinos waiting. I took a guess, he said. Oat milk, right? Perfect, I smiled. He stood when I sat. He always did. Little things that felt simple and old school and kind. Things Adam never once thought to do. We talked about the most random things, his students rewriting Romeo and Juliet into a therapy-positive comedy, my latest color palette experiments for the nonprofit branding, a terrible documentary we'd both stopped watching halfway through. I laughed, not politely, not carefully, not because I was performing a version of myself that kept the peace. A real laugh. When we walked out, he didn't try to hold my hand. He didn't crowd my space or hover or push. Instead, he paused near the brick wall outside the cafe. Can I see you again next weekend? He asked gently. Maybe dinner this time. I felt a warmth, not panic, not the calculating, are we too much? Am I asking too soon? Version of dating I'd gotten used to. Just ease. I'd like that, I said. Good. He smiled, the kind that softened the entire moment. Text me when you're free. He walked away with a casual, quiet confidence that didn't need to chase validation. I watched until he turned the corner. Hope, real, uncomplicated, gentle hope, flickered. I wasn't in love. I wasn't rushing. But I was open. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, I spread my design portfolio across the dining table. Lisa from Hope and Harvest had mentioned they were considering adding a permanent creative lead. Someone who could help shape the organization's long-term identity as they expanded. You'd be perfect for it, she'd said. Think about pitching yourself. I had, and now I was preparing. I laid out my best work. The nonprofits, new branding concepts. A logo series for 3 local restaurants. Personal art from my drawing class, charcoal sketches, and vibrant watercolor pieces. A rebrand for a bakery that had gone viral on Instagram. A poster series I'd done in college, but never showed anyone. Seeing everything together, my evolution, my voice, my style. Something unexpected rose inside me. Pride. Not the fragile kind that needed external validation. The kind that ran steady and warm in my chest. This was my work. My growth. My story. The partnership might not happen. I might pitch and be rejected, or the nonprofit might not expand as planned. But for the first time, uncertainty didn't scare me. It motivated me. I had already survived everything I thought I couldn't. I'd survived being made small. I'd survived humiliation in a room full of people who thought they were better than me. I'd survived manipulation dressed as love. And I'd rebuilt myself meticulously piece by piece. My future didn't need Adam's name in it. It didn't need his validation or his approval. It didn't need anyone's. It needed one thing. Me, choosing me. That evening, I stood on my balcony again. Chicago's skyline glittered against the sunset, each building glowing gold and copper. The air was cool, crisp, smelling faintly of rain. Inside my loft, a candle burned softly. My design sketches covered the table. A stack of freshly watered herbs sat by the window. My favorite playlist hummed through the speakers. It all felt like a life. Not a transition. Not an aftermath. A life. I took a deep breath, letting the city's hum settle in my lungs. The silence, the kind that used to terrify me, now felt like home. Like possibility. Like peace. I turned to go back inside and then paused. This was where my new life truly began. And I wasn't scared anymore. The next morning, something strange and unexpectedly grounding happened. I woke up without thinking about Adam at all. Not even for a second. I brushed my teeth, tied my hair up, opened the blinds, and brewed coffee. All without the shadow of him lingering in my mind the way it had for months. It wasn't until I was rinsing out my mug that the realization hit me. I had gone nearly 2 full hours without remembering he existed. It was liberating. My phone buzzed around 11 a.m. A text from Kara, a college friend I'd drifted apart from during my relationship with Adam. We'd been close once. Close enough that she knew what I looked like laughing at 2 a.m. in a dorm hallway wearing pajamas and a face mask. But Adam had never liked her. Too blunt, he'd said, which now felt like a giant red flag I'd politely ignored. Her message was simple. Thought you should know Adam and Ellie are together. Officially. Started dating like 2 weeks after you broke up. Sorry. I stared at the screen. Waited for the gut punch. Waited for the jealousy. Waited for the humiliation. But what washed over me instead surprised me. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. 2 weeks after we ended, which meant almost immediately, which meant the seeds had been planted long before, which meant my instincts, the ones I'd been told were dramatic, suspicious, overreacting, had been right the entire time. The backup fiancé joke wasn't a joke, not a rumor, not a drunken slip-up. It was Adam's truth showing itself in the one place he couldn't control, other people's mouths. I texted Kara back a simple thank you and put my phone down. Then I sat on my couch and let the truth settle in my bones. Adam and Ellie being together wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. Confirmation that I hadn't imagined anything. Confirmation that you're paranoid was manipulation. Confirmation that every instinct I'd buried had been screaming the truth. I hadn't lost anything. I had escaped. That night I texted Dana. Rooftop bar. 1 hour. I'm buying. She replied instantly. That good or that bad? My response. I honestly don't know. We met at a rooftop lounge downtown. String lights overhead, skyline glowing, cold air brushing past us. Dana already had 2 glasses of wine ready. Spill, she said. I told her everything. Kara's message, the timeline, the realization that the backup plan had never been hypothetical. Dana listened, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed with the kind of protective anger only a real friend has. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. That man didn't even have the decency to break up before moving on, she said. He kept you as the safety net while he figured out if she wanted him. That isn't love. That's cowardice. I took a long sip of wine, letting her words absorb in the spaces still healing inside me. The backup fiancé toast, I said quietly. Trevor wasn't making it up. Everyone knew. Dana's face softened. And Lily, deep down, you knew too. That's why you walked across that room and handed Ellie the ring. Because your instincts were louder than your fear. I let that truth settle. A truth I hadn't been brave enough to name until now. Dana raised her glass. To men who show us exactly who they are, she said. And to women who finally believe them. We clinked glasses. The sound felt like an exorcism. When I got home that night, the city lights flickered across my balcony. The air felt crisp and new, like a page turning. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped outside, leaning on the railing. Possibility. That's what the night air tasted like. Something open-ended and unburdened. Inside, I caught sight of something on my shelf, the velvet box. The cheap $100 ring. Ellie must have dropped it in her rush to flee my loft that night. I walked inside, picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The ring glinted weakly in the soft light. Ironic, Adam had called it. Irony, I whispered. is thinking this was ever going to define me. Then I grabbed my coat and walked downstairs to the vintage donation drop-off bin by the street corner. I lifted the box, held it for just a moment, and dropped it in. It hit the pile with a soft thud, swallowed by strangers' forgotten things. Someone else could decide what to do with it. I was done letting it symbolize anything. I walked back upstairs, closed my door, locked it. My loft felt different when I stepped inside, lighter, like something toxic had been removed. I stood in the center of the room. No more ring. No more Adam. No more waiting for a version of him that never existed. Just my space. My silence. My life. My rules. And for the first time in a long time, silence didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like freedom. The next few months unfolded like a slow, steady exhale, the kind you don't realize you've been holding in for years. It started with small things. I rearranged my furniture, turned my couch to face the windows so that each morning the sun, not my phone, greeted me first. Moved my desk to catch the best natural light. Swapped out the gray, throw pillows Adam preferred for deep emerald and burnt orange, ones I actually liked. I bought a print from a local artist of the Chicago skyline in watercolor, hung it above my desk, and stood staring at it for a long time. Not because it was perfect, but because it finally reflected a life that was becoming mine again. The loft didn't feel like a museum to a past relationship anymore. It felt lived in, warm, authentic, like an extension of my own skin. Hope and Harvest, the nonprofit, became a huge part of my life. Lisa, the creative director, quickly evolved from client to mentor to unexpected friend. She invited me to their community garden weekends. Saturday mornings spent pulling weeds, planting tomatoes, listening to volunteers talk about soil pH like it was religion. It was grounding, literally. Hands in dirt, sky overhead, no drama, no manipulation, just work and growth. One evening, Lisa invited me to a gallery opening in the West Loop. You need to meet more people, she said. Actual people, not just the ones in your computer. She wasn't wrong. The gallery was buzzing with artists, writers, designers, eccentric souls with paint under their fingernails or instruments slung over their backs. I met a photographer who needed branding for her new studio, a muralist who wanted promotional materials, a sculptor who talked about negative space like it was sacred. I found myself smiling, genuinely, at conversations that weren't about anyone's ex, or engagement rings, or manipulation disguised as humor. For the first time in a long time, my world was expanding again, not shrinking. I signed up for a weekend drawing class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do before letting Adam's opinion shrink my interests. You already know how to draw, he'd said once. Why would you pay to do it? As if personal growth required a price tag that made sense to him. The class was small, 6 of us, and absolutely perfect. Our instructor, Michael, had the permanently paint-stained hands of someone who lived his art, not just taught it. Art isn't about being perfect, he said during our first session. It's about being honest. I sketched a still life of coffee cups and wilted flowers and felt something uncoil inside me. A part of myself I'd stuffed away until it was small and quiet. Now it was stretching, breathing, returning. Then, on a random Tuesday morning in a downtown coffee shop, I ran into someone I didn't expect. Trevor. He froze when our eyes met, coffee halfway to his lips. For a moment, he looked like a kid caught stealing something from a convenience store. Lily, he said cautiously, can we talk? Against my better judgment, or maybe because I wanted to prove something to myself, I nodded toward the empty chair across from me. He sat, restless hands wrapped around his cup. I owe you an apology, he said, voice low. For the toast. That night. It was stupid. I didn't think. You meant it, I said calmly. You just didn't think I'd hear it. His jaw tightened. Then, after a long moment, he nodded. Yeah, he admitted quietly. I guess you're right. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to justify himself. He didn't blame the alcohol. He stood, pushed in his chair, and left without another word. I picked up my latte, took a sip, and felt something surprising. Closure, not dramatic, not emotional, just clean. Like a door that had finally stopped creaking and swung shut on its own. A few days later, my mother called. We hadn't talked deeply about Adam, only surface-level things. Weather, work, my sister Mia's kids. When I answered, her voice wavered. "Lily," she said, "why didn't you tell me about the breakup?" I had to hear from Mia. I shut my eyes. Because she adored Adam. Because she'd seen a version of him he'd performed flawlessly. Because I didn't know how to explain the kind of betrayal that wasn't physical or dramatic or obvious. The kind that eroded your sense of self piece by piece. "It was complicated, Mom," I said. "Complicated how? Did you give him a chance to explain? Did you try therapy?" "Lily, relationships take work. You don't just throw away a good man." I felt the old instinct rise. Defend yourself. Justify everything. Convince her you weren't wrong. But then something clicked. I didn't need her to understand. I just needed to tell the truth. "He had feelings for someone else," I said simply. I wasn't going to stay and be his backup plan. Silence. Then a long exhale. "You're stronger than I was at your age," my mother said softly. "I stayed in things I shouldn't have. I thought that was what you were supposed to do." Something in me untangled. "I love you, Mom," I whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart." We hung up, and for the first time, I felt the distance between us narrow instead of widen. The emotional progress came slowly. Then, suddenly, like stepping stones you didn't realize you'd laid down until you looked behind you and saw a path. One that led away from Adam, away from the version of myself I had been with him, and toward someone stronger, someone fuller, someone real. Myself. A week later, on a warm Saturday morning, I went to the farmer's market, the same market Adam and I used to visit every Sunday, back when I thought routine meant security. Armed with my woven basket and a vague promise to myself that I'd actually cook whatever I bought this time, I wandered the stalls. Chicago's early light stretched across rows of heirloom tomatoes, fresh herbs, honey jars, and sunflowers. I was picking out basil when I glanced up and froze. Adam and Ellie. Together. My heart kicked once. Not painfully, but with the distant surprise of seeing something you'd forgotten still existed. Ellie held a bouquet of sunflowers. Adam stood beside her, hand resting on the small of her back in that familiar way he used to touch me. For one split second, I expected a wave of hurt to hit me. Expected my stomach to drop, my throat to tighten. But instead, nothing. Just a distant, detached curiosity. The way you'd look at a movie from a genre you no longer watch. Adam didn't look happy. He didn't look sad either. He looked exactly the same as he had with me, like he was performing a role he thought made him look good. Ellie saw me first. Her smile dropped instantly. Her grip tightened on the flowers. She whispered something to Adam, a small, frantic gesture. When he turned and our eyes met, the moment felt surreal, like seeing someone from a former lifetime. I nodded, a polite, non-committal nod, the kind you give an acquaintance you barely remember. Then I turned away, not dramatically, not hurriedly, just simply, and asked the herb vendor how often I should trim basil stems to keep them fresh. As she explained the difference between water temperature and stem angles, I felt something shift inside me. This was peace. When I glanced back, Adam and Ellie were gone. I finished my shopping, tomatoes, fresh pasta, basil, rosemary, and a bunch of wildflowers for myself, and walked home through the late morning sun. Not once did I look over my shoulder. Later that afternoon, I arranged the wildflowers in a clear glass vase on my kitchen counter. The loft smelled like herbs and sun-warmed petals. I made pasta with the basil, actually cooked it this time, and ate it on my balcony while the city moved quietly below. No anxiety, no heartache, no stories spinning in my head about what could have been. Just me, my meal, my view, my day, my life. And it was enough. 6 months after the engagement party that changed everything, I woke to soft autumn light spreading across my bedroom like gold water. A Saturday. Quiet. Still. Gentle. I stretched across the bed, diagonally, unapologetically, and felt a happiness that wasn't loud or euphoric. It was something cleaner, deeper. Contentment. I got up, made coffee exactly the way I liked it, and wrapped myself in that oversized sweater Adam used to criticize. He never liked it, said it made me look frumpy. But I loved it. I loved how comfortable it was. I loved that it was mine. I stepped out onto the balcony with my mug, breathing in the crisp air. Then something struck me. My life looked nothing like what I once imagined, and exactly like what I needed. I didn't check my phone first thing anymore. I didn't hope for a text that never came. I didn't wonder what Adam was thinking or doing. I didn't care. Healing hadn't been a straight line. It had been a slow, steady unraveling of old knots, and the weaving of new ones in their place. By 11 a.m., I was sitting across from Dana at brunch, laughing about something absurd one of her co-workers had done. She raised her mimosa with a grin. To upgraded lives, she toasted, and to women who choose themselves. We clinked glasses. At 2 p.m., I walked into my drawing class. Charcoal smudges on fingers, canvas smelling faintly of dust and paper. Michael, our instructor, gave me a nod as I settled into my seat. Today, he said, we're drawing reflections. My breath caught for a moment. Reflections, not mirrors, not faces, not literal self-portraits, but the abstract shapes of who we had become. I let the charcoal run across the page in soft, sweeping strokes. Shadows, light, shifting contours. Not a person, but a feeling. When I stepped back, something in the drawing made my chest tighten. It was me, but not the me Adam had left behind. Not the me who once doubted her own worth. Not the me who flinched at jokes masked as cruelty. It was the woman who had walked out of her own engagement party with her head high. The woman who reclaimed a life. Piece by piece. Choice by choice. Day by day. That evening, I stopped by Mia's house. The twins ran at me screaming, limbs flying everywhere. Mia hugged me hard, whispering, "You look lighter." And I was. We sat on her porch after the kids went to bed, sipping tea and wrapped in blankets. She watched me for a long moment, then said, "You're glowing, Lil." I smiled. I think I finally put everything down. Mia nodded knowingly. And you're picking yourself up in the process. We stayed there until the sky turned navy and the air grew cold. On my drive home, Chicago glowed around me. City lights, lake breeze, the hum of late-night life. I cracked open my windows and let the cool wind rush in. This wasn't what I'd planned. It was better. When I stepped inside my loft, my space, my rules, my life, a wave of gratitude washed over me. Not for what I'd been through, but for what I'd become because of it. And deep down I knew. The best part of my story wasn't the moment I handed Ellie the ring. It was everything that came after. The next few weeks felt like a quiet unfolding. Like every day I stepped a little further into myself. Mornings started with sunlight spilling through my loft windows, warming the hardwood floors as I brewed my coffee. Work flowed. The Hope and Harvest rebrand kicked into full momentum. And for the first time in years, I felt creatively alive instead of creatively drained. One Friday afternoon, I got the message that shifted everything yet again. Lisa from Hope and Harvest emailed, "We want you to pitch for the creative partnership role next month. Start prepping. You've earned this." I stared at the screen, heart thudding with something that felt dangerously close to joy. A year ago, the idea of leading an entire creative department for a nonprofit would have terrified me. Not because I couldn't do it, but because I lived in the shadow of a man who made me question everything I was capable of. Now, I felt ready, excited, steady, like I had been walking toward this without even realizing it. The following weekend, I met Marcus again, this time at a small Italian cafe with vintage lamps and mismatched chairs. The kind of place where time feels slower. He waved me over with that easy, warm smile of his. I ordered the tiramisu, he said. If you don't want any, I'll happily eat both. I laughed, taking off my coat. I want some. He nodded approvingly. Good. If you'd refused, that would have been a red flag. Our conversation flowed the way it always did, effortlessly. He told me about a student who'd turned in a homework assignment written entirely in limericks. I told him about a color palette I'd been obsessing over. He showed me videos of his sophomore English class performing a chaotic version of Romeo and Juliet rewritten as a modern therapy session. By the time we finished the tiramisu, I realized something, a quiet, comforting truth. I didn't feel like I was auditioning for approval. I didn't feel like I had to be charming or small or easygoing. With Marcus, I was just myself. When he walked me home, we stopped in front of my building. A soft breeze blew across the street, making the string lights from a nearby restaurant sway. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets, rocking lightly on his heels. So, he said, dinner again next week? Yes, I said, smiling. Definitely. Good, he said. I'm trying to play it cool, but I really like you. His honesty was so unexpected, so refreshing, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. I like you too, I said. He didn't rush forward, didn't try to kiss me. He just smiled, a slow, satisfied, genuine smile, and said, Text me when you get upstairs, so I know you're safe. I nodded and headed inside, feeling something soft and new unfurl inside me. I wasn't falling in love. Not yet, but I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. That night, after showering and putting on my soft cotton pajamas, I spread my portfolio across the dining table. Logos, sketches, branding concepts, color studies, pieces of myself, pieces of my growth. This time, I didn't see someone who needed Adam's validation. I saw an artist, a designer, a woman capable of building an entire world from scratch, visually and emotionally. As I organized my work, I remembered the version of myself who thought a $100 engagement ring was ironic and charming, who overlooked red flags, who accepted crumbs because she thought they were meals. I didn't blame that version of me. I just didn't want to be her again. I put the finishing touches on a mood board, placed everything neatly into my portfolio binder, and stepped back. My chest filled with something solid, grounded, strong. I had rebuilt my life, not quickly, not cleanly, but brick by brick, day by day. And it showed. The following morning, I stepped onto my balcony with coffee in hand, watching sunlight stretch across Chicago. The river shimmered in the distance, and the hum of the city rose like a heartbeat. I leaned against the railing and whispered, almost without thinking, I'm proud of you. Not to anyone else. To myself. To the woman who walked out of her own engagement party. To the woman who chose respect over comfort. To the woman who understood that losing someone was sometimes the same as gaining herself. A breeze brushed past me, cool and gentle. Inside, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Good morning. Hope your coffee is strong and your day is even better. I smiled. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't predictable. It wasn't planned the way it used to be. It was better. And for the first time in my entire adult life, the future didn't scare me. It excited me. As autumn settled deeper into the city, my life became a rhythm. Steady, deliberate, peaceful. Mornings meant sunlight spilling across my loft floors. Afternoons meant design meetings, sketching sessions, and bursts of inspiration. Evenings meant quiet dinners, long walks, or conversations with Mia on the phone while her twins shrieked in the background. Every day felt like a return to myself. Every day felt like a chapter one was writing with intention instead of survival. And then came the moment that solidified everything. One crisp Sunday afternoon, I sat across from Lisa at a corner table in the nonprofit's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River, the water glinting pale blue under the clouds. She flipped through my portfolio slowly, stopping occasionally to study a detail. Her pencil tapped. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Then she closed the binder, looked up, and said, "Lily, you absolutely nailed this." My breath hitched. "We're offering you the creative partnership position. Full-time, leadership, a permanent seat at the table." For a second, I couldn't speak. I'd spent months rebuilding my life. But this was the moment it all converged. The moment I wasn't choosing survival. I was choosing expansion. "I'd love to accept," I finally said, my voice steady. Lisa grinned, warm and sincere. "I knew you would," she said. "You're the real deal." Those words, "the real deal," echoed inside me like a bomb over old wounds. All the times Adam made me feel small. All the times he laughed instead of defended me. All the times he implied my career wasn't serious enough. All the times I shrank to avoid conflict. Gone. Replaced with this. A table I'd earned. A title I deserved. A future I built myself. That night, I lit a candle in my loft, poured a glass of wine, and stood at my windows watching the city sparkle. The skyline felt like a mirror of my life, bright, rebuilt, rising. My phone buzzed. "Marcus, celebrating your pitch success. Should I bring dessert?" I smiled at the message, warmth threading through me. Not because I needed him, but because I wanted him. And that distinction mattered more than anything. I texted back, "Yes, and bring that ridiculous chocolate tart you love." A few minutes later, he replied, "On my way." And for the first time in years, the anticipation in my chest wasn't fear, anxiety, or dependency. It was joy. An hour later, after dessert and easy conversation, Marcus and I stood on my balcony. The air was crisp, and the city below pulsed with life. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets and glanced at me sideways. "You seem different," he said quietly. "In a good way." "I feel different," I said. He waited, giving me space, letting me choose my words. "I lost myself once," I said softly. "Or maybe I gave myself away, little by little. I didn't even know it was happening. But rebuilding, choosing myself, it felt like waking up." Marcus nodded, his expression tender. "I'm glad you did," he said, "because I really like the woman you are now." I felt something in my chest loosen, and then deepen. Not dependency, not fear, not the frantic, "Please choose me," energy I'd spent years trapped in. Just connection. Healthy, steady, safe. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. Standing there with him, looking out over the city that had witnessed every version of me, I realized something profound. This silence, the same silence that once felt like emptiness, now felt like freedom, like air I could finally breathe. Later that night, after he left, I curled into bed with the windows slightly open. The cool breeze slipped in, carrying the soft hum of Chicago at night. I glanced around my loft. The artwork I'd chosen, the plants thriving in the windows, the desk where I'd fought my way back to myself, the space that held my tears, my rediscovery, my growth. This was home. Not because of who was in it, but because of who I was in it. The woman who walked out of an engagement party. The woman who refused to be someone's backup plan. The woman who chose herself even when it hurt. The woman who rebuilt an entire life from the ashes of someone else's expectations. I pulled my blanket up, sinking deeper into the mattress, and whispered into the quiet, "I'm proud of you." And for the first time in years, I meant it with my whole heart. Outside, the city lights shimmered. Inside, everything was still and peaceful. And that peace, it didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like power, like freedom, like the beginning of every good thing still to come. If this story of Lily taking back her power had you cheering, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she placed that ring in Ellie's hand and said, "He's all yours." What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.